Let's see if we can get some answers to those questions. So let me introduce our guest, member from the Syrian Social Club, Haytham Al-Sabahi, joins us from London. We have political analyst Jihad Murakadeh, who joins us from Beirut. And author and historian Webster Griffin Tarpley joins us from Washington. Gentlemen, welcome. I'd like to first start with you, Jihad Murakadeh. Tell us what you make of the most recent attack on Syria's soldiers, which was so close to that UN convoy that it just missed it by seconds. Do you think that UN convoy with its head was the target?
No, it was a message. It was a message that some people wanted to send to the United Nations, that at the end of the day, the observers' mission is not going to go anywhere. Now, whether the message was sent by the Syrian government or by the so-called Syrian opposition, we're not terribly sure.
Okay, now that's the big question, isn't it? Haytham Al-Sabahi, what do you think? You have our guest in Beirut saying he's not sure whether it's from the Syrian government or from the opposition who is armed on the ground. To whose benefit would it be were this to occur, their target?
Well, good evening to you, to your viewers, first of all. He should be sure. This is there is an element what they don't want for this mission to succeed. And we know they're announcing every day. They're announcing from Saudi Arabia, they're announcing from Qatar, some party of the Salafis of the opposition. They're announcing every day this mission is not going to succeed. The Syrian government, I believe, and the Syrian people, they insisting this mission is going to succeed. They want to show these observers what exactly happening on the ground. And that's what exactly those elements outside are frightened of. They want the truth to come. I believe, I mean, in Syria, they're using the people of Syria and the government, they're using those observers to combat some of the fabrication and lies and incitement coming out of some media. So these observers can tell the truth and tell exactly what's happening on the ground and show the exact picture. And that's why you get, like your guest, try to blame the Syrian government. Syrian government don't need this type of operations, don't need to, if they welcome the observers, that's it. They will work with the observers. Mr. Mood, the head of the observer, was in the Golan Heights. He knows very well the Syrian government, and he has good relation with the Syrian government. So this is about try to put it on the Syrian government, and this explosion. They injured Syrian soldiers after all. I mean, they are delusional. I don't know what to say. They are absolutely delusional. They are not succeeding with their propaganda, and the truth is going to come out, and everybody.
But the truth has come out.
And actually,
go ahead, Jihad Murakadeh. Go ahead.
No, the gentleman is saying that the truth will come out. The truth has come out. The truth has come out in the report of Kofi Annan. The truth has come out in the report of Ban Ki-moon. So don't tell me the truth will come out. Those people who want to hide things is exactly the Syrian government.
Okay, Webster Griffin Tarpley in response. Go ahead, Murakadeh. I'm sorry, Murakadeh. Go ahead with your statement so I can get a response from our guest in Washington.
So basically, what I was trying to say is that the Syrian government wants to hide the truth. The Syrian government, the truth has come out because the United Nations Security Council has heard the report of the Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and they know very well the Syrian government has not abided by the plan of Mr. Kofi Annan. And this is why Mr. Kofi Annan said this is the last chance, and my mission is not undetermined in time.
Okay, Webster Griffin Tarpley.
At the end of the day,
let's bring him in, and you can continue afterwards. Webster Griffin Tarpley, in response to our guests in Beirut, and ultimately who's going to benefit from this?
Well, it's hard to see anybody benefiting, but in terms of who did it, I think these are the death squads. These are the NATO-backed death squads financed by Saudi Arabia, by Qatar, and others that are at the root of this entire situation, as I found on the ground in Damascus, in Homs, and in Banyas back in mid-November. One could hardly imagine a more embarrassing moment for the United Nations bureaucracy with their really appeasement approach towards these death squads than to have their own observers attacked by the death squads. And of course, the death squads are some pretty lawless people. It's not clear that they're under control at all times.
Well, tell us about who the death squads are. Can you, Webster, Griffin, Tarpley, can you elaborate a little bit more who these death squads are, who's in them, like these allegations of Al-Qaeda, etc.?
We had a very interesting presentation at the stakeout at the United Nations Security Council yesterday, where the Syrian ambassador Jafari came out and said, I think with more detail than before, he has a CD that he was showing. I think World Public Opinion would like to see it. His CD shows the confessions of 20 or 25 foreign fighters, people from Libya, people from Turkey, maybe from other places, right? Maybe from farther afield. My impression was they were people from Algeria, from Chechnya, from the stands in Central Asia. And he pointed out that these groups are being infiltrated with the help of Turkey, with the help of Lebanon, and in particular I would add the Rafiq Hariri group in Lebanon, and they're getting money from the reactionary feudal Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and a couple of others. So I think that was an important moment. Now, in terms of Kofi Annan, Kofi Annan is a typical representative of the school of British colonial administrators, and he's clever, but he's essentially involved in a game of deception. He is now repeating this mantra of civil war, civil war, civil war. We've heard that from Hillary Clinton back in November. She said she saw a civil war. Well, nobody else could see it, but she's been trying to bring it about. I think we have a situation at the United Nations that reminds us of how the League of Nations was destroyed in the 1930s. If you don't stand up to international terrorism and aggression, which in this case is targeting Syria, then you may go the way of the League. Ban Ki-moon, I don't see how he can continue in office. His performance yesterday at the Atlantic Council here in the United States was one of the most deplorable, one-sided farces I've ever seen. Kofi Annan is, of course, more clever. I would say to Kofi Annan, why don't you stop beating around the bush? Set up a peace table in Geneva and invite the Syrian government and invite the so-called opposition and see who comes. The Syrian government will be there, but these opposition groups probably won't come because they've been told by their backers in NATO and the Gulf, you're not allowed to negotiate. They don't want a negotiated solution. They want the pretext to
really trust
Syria
the Syrian government
and destroy it, right? Break the country up.
Okay, Jihad Murakari, I'm going to come to you, but let me get our guest in London on what Webster Griffin Tarpley has said. I mean, really, that's not a bad proposal. It sounds pretty logical. Why hasn't there been enough efforts on that front? For example, what our guest in Washington said, having the Syrian government sit across the table from the opposition groups, if we know who they are, these opposition groups.
There is many opposition groups. They are not one side. I mean, there is the side who is working with Muslim Brotherhood. There is the other side who is Salafist, and your guest knows very well from Lebanon. They are backed by other Salafist elements, and from Tripoli in the north of Lebanon. And there is the others, the Takfiris. They joined by Al-Qaeda, because we know Belhaj and others, they are in Libya, and they have a cross to south of Turkey, and they're operating from south of Turkey. And the Syrian government said they have captured some of them. They had killed the Tunisian who is coming from Al-Nahda, which they are a Muslim Brotherhood also backed. So the picture is there. I mean, we don't want nobody, that's what we said. When I said the truth will come out, the truth will come out against this media who's inciting. Not again, to show ordinary people, the people in Syria, they know the truth. The population in Syria, they know the truth very well. But I'm afraid there is a huge media machine working to divert the truth, to incite, to fabricate. We know. Your guest sitting there in Lebanon, he knows what a propaganda machine is this. They used it before, and they're using it now in Lebanon. And he knows exactly how in Lebanon, every person has a station.
Okay, let me bring him in then. Let me bring in Jihad Morikade.
Exactly
Go ahead in response, please. Jihad Morikade.
Yes, about the propaganda machine, I think the Syrian government is quite expert at the propaganda machine. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I would like to add that, yes, there are Salafists and whatever Muslim extremists that you're talking about. But is that all? Are you trying to tell me that all these people who are going to the street are strictly Salafists? There are Christians amongst them, are there Salafists? There are Kurds, there are all sorts of people are going to the streets. So Syrian propaganda is trying to depict all of this as being a fight against Islamic Brotherhood or something like that.
Well, does it make it right
totally
then?
Untrue.
Wait, does it make it right if you have these different, well, from different backgrounds? Let's go with the SNC or the FSA, the Syrian National Council, if they have people on the ground, or the Free Syrian Army. If you have Al-Qaeda elements, as an example, on the ground there, it is said that they are now turning to extremism just for the obsession that the U.S. and the Saudi Arabia and Qatar have, along with some other countries, for regime change. Doesn't make it okay to go to the extent and levels that they have gone to.
Well, first of all, let's first define who is going to extensive levels that they have gone to. Is it the opposition who is fighting for their lives, or is it the Syrian army whose brutality has been even monitored by the United Nations? Who is going to extremes? You must make this clear, first of all.
Well,
second, in terms of extremes, I would like to come back to something very special, which is that the extremes of the Syrian regime, in terms of the propaganda, in terms of the way they are fighting the opposition. You know, in all countries in the world, when you have people demonstrating in the streets, you shoot at them with rubber bullets. And that's exactly, for example, what's happening in Bahrain, because Bahrain is a subject that seems to be very interesting. Okay?
We're going to get to Bahrain. Webster,
just imagine if the Bahrain government was bombing the whole cities of Jidhabs and what have you in Bahrain with their own army. However, when they shoot with rubber bullets, people complain. But when Syria destroys the whole city, nobody complains about it?
Okay.
And then you're telling me who's going to extremes?
Well, we can talk about Bahrain. Maybe we'll talk about the stance from the U.S. perspective, and of course, how there's Saudi-backed forces in that Persian Gulf island. Webster Griffin Tarpley, explain to our guests in Beirut, perhaps I couldn't, about the Al-Qaeda and how the U.S. and Al-Qaeda have one goal in common, and that's this regime change that they both have in common. Therefore, doesn't that make it that U.S. is supporting Al-Qaeda, vice versa, since they both have the same goal in mind?
Absolutely. Yes, Al-Qaeda, after all, as I have argued for many years, Al-Qaeda is the CIA Arab Legion. It was created by the CIA, by the British MI6, for Afghanistan, to fight enemies of NATO. In that case, it was the Soviet Union. And it has been used repeatedly for that purpose. We all have before our eyes the example of Libya last year. Libya was assaulted by a NATO air force, but the infantry on the ground was overwhelmingly composed of people, the commanders at least, like Belhaj, who's been mentioned. These commanders were dyed-in-the-wool Al-Qaeda operatives, and that point was made by Ambassador Jafari yesterday. I would say, however, that Ambassador Jafari needed to go further, because he mentioned other powers, and he was asked in the Q&A, what other powers do you mean? Of course, he wouldn't say, those are the United States, Britain, France, the NATO states, and the Israelis. We've got a big article in the Washington Post here today about how the Israelis are absolutely committed to getting President Assad out. We've got Steinmetz, the Israeli politician Steinmetz, who's one of the members of that octet that decides over peace and war. He says, for the whole world, we've got to bring down Assad. Well, for the whole world, I'm afraid not. The other thing is, if you want to give a case in point, we have Giuseppe Navarro, is the apostolic vicar in Aleppo. He's a representative of the Vatican. He was asked about 4 students were killed in Aleppo in the last couple of days. And I think this is absolutely typical. He said Turkish and Libyan foreign fighter fanatics, jihadis, had gotten themselves into the buildings of the universities, the dormitories, and started shooting at the Syrian army. And then when there was a counter move by the Syrian army, naturally, some students got caught in the middle. That is the reality. There was at least a kind of a peaceful democratic protest. But the problem was, from the very beginning in March, right, from the word go, there were snipers from these death squads that were shooting at policemen and troops in order to create a counter response that would get civilians killed. That is the reality the whole time. Any analysis that doesn't start with the death squads and the role of Negroponte in Baghdad and then Robert Ford in Damascus, I would actually ask General Robert Mood, if you were there from 2009 to 2011 in Damascus, what did you know about the formation of these death squads? That would be a really interesting question.
Well, Haytham al-Sibai, any which way you look at this, when it comes down to what the Syrian people want, what they don't want is a military intervention in their country. Now, there are talks, of course, with the U.S. and NATO, the military arm of the UN, mulling over this type of approach. Therefore, why is it that what is being exercised is not, this is by U.S., Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and some other Western countries, they're not listening to what the Syrian people want? Why do you think that is not being heeded or even really discussed or covered at length?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll tell you something. Even some of the guys who came out in demonstration asking for some, what do you call it? They have some demands. We are not saying that. We in the Syrian Social Club call for regime reform, but not to regime change. We all want to see Syria is not a good and a beautiful country and go ahead with the political process and be on the international arena in the Middle East, one of the best countries. But there is other elements from outside. They're trying to play one moment on the sectarian war, the other moment on the civil war. Neither Kofi Annan or Ban Ki-moon knows what they're talking about. There is no civil war in Syria for a simple reason. There is some people who picked up arms and some people those terrorists who crossed from the border on one side, and there is the majority of the Syrian on the other side who will never pick up arms because they depend on their armies, they depend on their police, and they depend on their security. We will not pick up arms. We have a good army, we have a security service, and we have a police. And these people, they are there to do their jobs.
Let me bring in Jihad Morakate.
Let me tell you one point.
Yes, let me bring in Jihad Morakate. Jihad Morakate, in response to our guests in London, let me have some of your last words in this segment.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
I just want your last words, reaction to our guests there in London.
My last reaction is as follows. The first point is people are talking about what the Syrian people want. Okay, who says what the Syrian people want? If you really believe what you are saying, then let's have clear and free elections in Syria without the Ba'ath Party, without security service, and Bashar al-Assad should first resign. And you have an international election under, a general election under international supervision. And then you can tell what people want. But if you put a revolver at the head of some people and say, what do you want? Of course, what do you want? The elections that happened 2 days ago, nobody took it seriously. That is point number one. Point number two, you can talk about conspiracy as much as you want, and you can have the conspiracy in the opposite way. It's very easy. Every time the Syrian government does something, it's conspiracy, it's Robert Ford, It's who John Negroponte and what have you. So please,
Okay. I'm
take
sorry
this
to jump
conspiracy
in,
theory
and I
away.
apologize,
My third
but-
point, please, my third point.
Quickly,
My
please.
third point is, as a human being, how do you accept, as a human being, forget all America and Al-Qaeda and everything, how do you accept that the Syrian government bombs its own cities?
Okay, Webster, Griffin, and Tarpley
How
in
do you accept
response.
that?
Quickly.
Well, we just had an election. These opposition groups boycotted it, I suspect because they knew they would lose, that Assad...
These
based
are not
on
free
my estimate,
elections.
About 65%
But bring some international observers. These are not free elections.
70%.
I don't care. The
No,
numbers
if
don't
you
mean
don't like
anything.
those
You are talking
elections,
about a
what
single
elections
party.
will you ever like?
I want a free election under international supervision. Then I will believe it.
Yes, but you have these.
And without the
preconditions.
Ba'ath Party
I
and
would
without
like
the
to have an
security
election here where I
service.
say, I'd like to have an election where I say Obama has to resign before we have an election, or the Republican Congress has to resign. This is not
Okay.
democracy. That's
Okay, I'm
foreign
unfortunately going to have to
interference.
cut this.
And
We're
that's
just
what
fresh
you're
out of
calling
time.
for.
Thank you very much, Webster Griffin Tarpley, their author and historian. Thank you so much, Jihad Murakade, political analyst from Beirut and member of the Syrian Social Club, Haytham Al-Sibahi from London. And thank you for watching another edition of the Press TV News Analysis. From me, Tarpley, and the entire team is goodbye.